Track and field is one of those sports that doesn't have a lot of interest in the United States in terms of viewership, but it has a lot of global interest. Think about the Summer Olympics and how popular track and field is during that time. Track and field also is really two sports. There's indoor track and field and there's outdoor track and field. Me personally, I prefer indoor because you're in a confined space and there's many events going on at one time in a very close confinement. Outdoor can be spread over a couple of different fields, but it's also very, very exciting. So as with all the other sports we've talked about, before you go cover a track and field event, you need to learn the basics. First of all, you need to research before you arrive to learn what events and what athletes are going to be competing. If you're going to have a world-class decathlete on an event, you want to make sure you're there for the decathlon. Some of the events may not be as exciting, and those you really don't need to focus on as much. USA Open and Junior Outdoor Track and Field Championships have very specific events that you need to attend because they're qualifiers. So you need to know as much as you can about those. You can see the build-up and you can see how athletes are competing as they're working toward those national and world events. World and collegiate events are measured in meters, not yards. So you're going to have to get used to that metric system. Again, track and field, a lot of global interest, but in the United States, we still stick with the yards and feet and inches and all of that. Not in track and field, we're switching over to the metric system. Some events are scored, others are just for individuals. So you might have a triangular meet if you're covering a high school event, and it might be Warrensburg against Clinton and Smith Cotton. And so we're looking at the scores of how their competitors finish. You know, track and field we look at a lot of times as an individual sport. There is a team component to it, so you need to find out if it's going to be scored as a team event or if athletes are just competing for medals and to advance to later rounds. In field events, keep in mind that athletes do get 3 attempts, and generally they're going to get 3 attempts to advance to the next round, and in that round they get 3 attempts. So keep that in mind. In the relays, there is a zone. They have to exchange the baton in that time, within that zone, anywhere within that zone. But if the lead runner gets out of the zone before receiving the baton, their team is disqualified. As a matter of fact, athletes can be disqualified for many different reasons. Maybe wearing the wrong kind of cleats if it's in an indoor event. If in the hurdles, for example, an athlete clips the hurdle for a competitor or runs into another lane. In field events, if they step over the barrier, that's going to be a disqualification. Not necessarily from the event, but from that attempt. You need to learn the difference between the FAT times and the handheld times. Handheld obviously are with a stopwatch. FAT is a computerized system, so learn about that. Again, I said indoor track and field is a little bit different than outdoor, so keep that in mind. And then learn the NCAA provisional and automatic qualifying times. Athletes can meet a qualifying mark, time, distance, height, and automatically go to the national NCAA championships. If they get a provisional mark, that means, say for example, a field is going to take 12 athletes. A field event is going to take 12 athletes, and only 11 meet only 11 meet the automatic qualifying mark. Well, they'll take one more athlete who makes a provisional mark. So you may have 10 that make the provisional mark. The athlete with the highest of those provisional marks is going to qualify for nationals. Okay, so now that you know those basics, get ready to cover the event. Number one, you want to get to the event early and scope the terrain. Find out where they're competing in each of the different events. For example, at UCM, if you're covering outdoor track and field, all of the running events are going to take place at Walton Stadium Kennedy Field. However, the throwing events happen at the field right behind the multipurpose building. This is where they do the hammer throw, the shot put, the discus, the javelin, and then across the street from that is where they do the jumping events, the pole vault, the high jump, triple and long jump. So you need to know where those events are. You're going to need to move around so you can follow those field events because you may have certain athletes that you're wanting to cover and they're going to be at different locations. So you need to do some research so you know that. Who's going to be in the event? What's their biographical information? What are their top marks coming in? How close are they to qualifying for the next round? That's important information for you to know, and you need to make a list of those focuses. Which events do you want to cover? Now, because of this, you need to pick up a brochure or packet that has meet schedules, the records, the standards to move on to the next event, because you want to find out, okay, well, I have a hurdler that I want to cover, and I also have a pole vaulter. That's, again, in 2 different locales. If they're happening at the exact same time, you're going to have to do a little strategy and say, all right, well, I'll cover my pole vaulter during the prelims, get over and cover the hurdler for the finals, go back over and see if I can catch the pole vaulter during the prelims, especially if you're trying to get photos or video. As you're watching the specific events during a track and field meet, obviously you're going to want to focus on the local athletes. If you're the sports information director covering for the University of Central Missouri, you want to watch the UCM athletes. If you're covering for the Sedalia Democrat, you're going to want to focus on Smith Cotton's athletes and any athletes that also run in their conference to see how they're doing. You want to talk about the battles that happen during races. You may get a really tight bunch in the middle of a 1,500-meter run, and you want to see, is one team packing in around another lead runner from one of the other teams to try and keep that runner bottled up where they can't get through? Are they having to slow down and then try and go wide around the turn so they can get through it, which can slow their time and take a lot more energy, but it may be the only way for that runner to advance? As with cross country, look at the splits and watch the strategies. This particularly is going to take place during the distance events. In the hurdles, in the 100 in the dash, the 100-meter dash, the 200-meter dash, these splits are not quite as important. But the longer the race, the more those splits are going to become important, and you're going to need to think about strategies. Now, do think about strategies in the sprinting events when you do have prelims, semifinals, and finals, because you want to find out, is a runner burning up all their energy early on, or are they saving some for the finals? And then watch the pack during the race, again, just to see if they're bottling up, if you've got one team that's trying to run together to encourage one another, and so forth. After you've watched the event and it's time to conduct your interviews, this is where your advanced research is really going to come in handy. For example, you may have a steeplechase athlete who's kind of leveled out, and then all of a sudden in this race they ran a personal best. What was it that they did in this race to get so much faster? Did they do a lot of interval training? Were they working on their timing getting over the hurdles? Were they working on their timing getting out of the water pit? What did they do in this race that really set them apart? Well, you can't really do that unless you've done your advanced research. You also want to ask specific questions and then ask them to talk about their previous competitions and how it built them to this one. You know, were they working on different things in previous races? Maybe they were focusing on their start in one race, and then in the next meet they were working on getting over the hurdles, and in the race after that they were working on their finish, and now this time they put it all together because they've been building to this event. Think about those types of things. Ask their coaches to discuss different strategies, and talk to the coaches early. Get there and let them know you're present. Track and field coaches and athletes, it's been my experience, really appreciate when journalists come out to cover them because, again, they don't get as much attention. So visit with them and let them know you're there. Let them know who you're going to be wanting to talk to. Let them know a little bit about what you're going to be asking, and then just get that taken care of. Okay? And then finally, don't forget the field athletes. Field athletes like to say it's field and track, not track and field. But they have a lot that they have going on between their different prelims and then going on to advance to the next round. There's a lot of technique that goes into those throws and into the jumps. So focus on that. Focus on how they've worked together with other competitors. You know, one thing I found in track and field, particularly with the field athletes, they help coach one another. That can be really interesting. So you can see some of those bonds that have occurred. They're competing with one another, but they're also really trying to help one another. So don't forget about those guys. Here are some of the keys you need to think about, including AP style, whenever you're writing up the story at the end. Look at the note about how to spell out times on first reference, as well as spell out distances in first references. You also want to compare the performances by offering gaps in time or geography. Maybe they had a big break in their time in the mile. There's a big gap between the first place and second place finishers, but then 3, 4, and 5 are only divided by a second or two. Same thing with height and lengths with their jumps and their throws. Do focus on the team performance in your lead if it is a scoring event for the teams. If not, then just focus on the top individual performance. You may have one athlete who competes in 3 or 4 different events, performed very, very well. They may not have won a single one, but they placed in every one of them. So keep that in mind. Obviously, you want to include the name and location of the meet in the opening paragraph, and then include a paragraph that names the team and individual winners, where you're just breaking down who did what in what event. And then finally, offer a quick summary of the key results somewhere in the story. what this meant for the team, where this put them in contention for national rankings or state rankings, where this moved some of the top finishers. Did they advance to the next round? Did they get an automatic or provisional qualifying time? Did you get a lot of personal bests in this event? So those kinds of summaries can really help. Once you've put all that together, you're well on your way to being a track and field writer.